So, welcome everybody. So, we've been going through this book on our Sharing the Dharma Days. It's called An Open-Hearted Life, Transformative Methods for Compassionate Living from a Clinical Psychologist and a Buddhist Nun. And if you live in India, Australia, the British associated countries, it's published under the title Living with an Open Heart. And it has a different cover and it's cheaper. So we're on chapter 27, I was told. That's called The Disadvantages of Self-Centeredness. So I thought it was very interesting, that we're on this chapter, because today I got an email from somebody. We've been getting, many of you have written us very kind emails, checking and seeing if we're okay and telling us about your experience on the lockdown or being stranded in Nepal and India or, whatever's going on in your life. And this one person who wrote this morning was, talking about the fear and the anxiety and stuff that comes up. And then she said, but all the teachings on the disadvantages of self-centeredness and the benefits of cherishing others cancel all that out when I remember to practice them. Yeah? And then here, that's the topic for today, the disadvantages of self-centeredness. So I think it was self-made, what a coincidence, that we have the coronavirus mess with us right now. But, this kind of thing isn't limited to the coronavirus. We can find anything to be anxious and afraid of. Our mind is extremely creative regarding making ourselves miserable. And when we look, it all comes back to the self-centered thought that's always thinking about me, I, my, mine. What's happening to me? Am I getting what I want? How are people treating me? Oh, they're not treating me right. On and on and on. I'm the one who's suffering more than everybody else. Okay, I'm sure we're all very familiar with it. The problem is we don't identify this as our self-centered mind. Yeah, we identify it as this is the reality of my life. Yeah, that I'm just a victim of whatever is happening and everybody else has it better and nobody treats me fair. Okay, so coronavirus or not coronavirus, we're going to find something to feel, left out, miserable, depressed, whatever. Okay, like I said, our mind's extremely creative. Writing horror stories about starring me. Yeah. So I'm not trying to diminish, what people are experiencing. I mean, some people are in the hospital with the virus. Yeah. And some people are stranded in other countries. And, Syria still has a war going on. And, Iran, due to our sanctions, there's, the infrastructure there's falling apart. So everybody has some real difficult situations. But the thing is, how do we deal with the situation? Yeah. So this whole topic about the disadvantages of self-centeredness is that we usually make a situation worse by the way that we thinking about it, or we create suffering in a situation where we actually don't need to. Okay, so just to be aware of how our own mind, by its way of looking at things, especially by focusing so overwhelmingly on the center of the universe, me, creates suffering. Because you can lie in that hospital bed and think about the kindness of the people who are taking care of you and how fortunate you are to live in a country where there's medical facilities, even though they're running short of equipment and so on. But still, there's kindness around us. There's goodness around us. So we can lie in a hospital bed and think about that, or we can lie in the hospital bed and just say, oh no, I'm going to die, and I'm afraid of death, and my bucket list is there, and I never got to go to Disneyland, as if that mattered when you were dying. So we can make it the situation torment ourselves, or we can transform the situation into the path to awakening. And it all depends on how we deal with the self-centered mind. So I should be reading, but I love talking about this topic because this is actually remembering the disadvantages of self-centeredness and looking at my own mind that has a tendency to whine and complain is one of the foremost techniques I use to keep my mind happy. Whenever my mind starts to go off balance, then I remember this particular topic in the Lamrim, and it's like, children, get over it. You're not seeing things accurately. Okay, so here we go. So the fact that others have been tremendously kind to us and that our lives depend on them is not necessarily reflected in the way that we generally think. In our normal daily lives, most of us, not saying everybody, but just check up if you're included in this. Most of us think of ourselves first and foremost. This self-centered thought believes that we are the most important, that our happiness is more urgent than others, and that our pain hurts more deeply than theirs. Right? The self-centered thought is deceptive, and it has been with us for a long time. Following its advice has brought suffering to us and to those around us. And this is interesting when we really stop and look at our life experience, how many problems this self-centeredness has caused us and how it has caused us to behave in ways that make other people miserable. Being self-centered has, in fact, interfered with our happiness. For these reasons, we want to counteract it, and remembering its disadvantages is a good way to do this. Thinking of the faults of self-centeredness isn't a matter of scolding ourselves for being selfish. That is not the point. Okay, so we're very used to scolding ourselves for being selfish, for self-pity, everything like that. All that turning against ourselves and scolding ourselves, that is also self-centeredness. Because again, it's making ourselves a big deal out of me. Look how selfish I am. I'm more selfish than anybody else in the world. I don't deserve to be alive. I don't deserve this. And again, it's all about me, I, my, and mine. Okay, so that's not the point. Scolding, belittling ourselves is not the point. Instead, because we want to be happy and live peacefully, we seek to identify what prevents that and then counteracts it. counteracted. So it's because we respect ourselves, because we want to be happy, because we want to make our lives meaningful. It's for good reasons that we want to overcome this self-centered thought, because it really is a big block in being happy this life and in achieving our spiritual purposes. We naively think that being self-centered, by looking out for ourselves, we will protect ourselves from harm and find happiness. Okay. So we always hear this thing, how we've got to take care of ourselves. And if I'm not for myself, nobody else will be for me. Yeah. So we're not, in leaving that kind of thing aside, we're not saying we should sacrifice ourselves and suffer. Okay. But we're just looking at what causes happiness and what causes suffering. And our neurotic form of self-centeredness causes us problems and a lot of suffering. When we look in the past, we are likely to discover that the things we did in the past that we now regret, okay, if you think of things you did in the past that you don't feel good about doing now, got a couple in your mind? Yeah, then think about, weren't they due to the self-centered thought? Why did you act that way? Wasn't it, because I'm caring about myself in a selfish way more than anybody else? And then look at what the results are. I feel terrible about what I did, motivated by that self-centeredness. So right away, right there, we see that the self-centered thought is not protecting us from suffering. Okay, it's causing it. So the self-centered thought says, criticize this person, and we oblige. Make love with that person. It doesn't matter if they're married, and we obey. Forget this stuff about your parents being kind. They spent the family's limited money on your sick brother and ignored you, and we agree. Okay. Eat this food even though you're already full, or have a third drink. No one else will know. And we follow suit. Yeah, these are all the things that self-centeredness tells us. Being self-centered makes us very sensitive without even realizing it. Everything that occurs in the world around us is interpreted in terms of how it relates to me. Forget that there's over 3 billion other people. It's all about me. Now, the coronavirus really shows that. Yeah, when you get afraid, when you get anxious about the what's happening in the world, who are you most concerned with? You, yourself, and the people that you're attached to. Yeah. Other people in the world, doesn't matter. We don't get anxious about them. Yeah. We get anxious about ourselves and the people that we're attached to. Yeah. So just think, if you didn't have that self-centeredness, centered mind, you'd be free of all that anxiety and fear. Yeah. And you'd be able to look out and see the kindness of others and do things to connect with them. Yeah. Who are you worried about? When the economy is going, blah, 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 blah. Who are you worried about? Yeah. Are you worried about the Indian migrant workers who got stuck in Delhi and are walking hundreds of miles back to their villages? Yeah. Are you worried? Are you concerned about how people doing gig jobs in this country, don't have money? The Uber drivers are out of work, so many people, they don't have a backup system. Do we think about how are they going to survive? Because not everybody's been included in this big, coronavirus bill that the Congress passed. If you're an executive and you're a stockholder in one of the airlines, you're going to be cushy during this because they got a big bailout. But what about other people? Do we worry about them? Are we concerned about them? Yeah. So if we broaden our mind, this rigidness that the self-centeredness does, if we're able to loosen that and broaden that, then our whole experience transforms. So I read an article about one woman who has 6 kids, and they range from like 7 to, late teens. And she wanted them to learn how to reach out and connect. So they wrote a little thing that they passed out all over their neighborhood and the next neighborhood and said, if you're older and you can't go shopping, or if you're disabled and you need something, call us. Okay. So many people called just to say thank you so much for your kindness and reaching out. They were so touched by that. Yeah. And then one woman who was 90 years old, who lived alone, she needed some eggs. So she called, So the mother took some of her youngest kids to the grocery store and bought a dozen eggs. They were the last eggs in the store. But she's had some at home because she had chickens. So the little kids, 7, 8, 11, they were carrying the eggs very carefully over to this woman's house, and they stood 6 feet away from her and, put the eggs down so she could pick them up. And then they started asking her about her life. And she started telling them what it was like to grow up during the Depression. Yeah, what they had, what they didn't have then. She told them about World War II and growing a victory garden because, to grow vegetables because, there weren't many vegetables left in the stores. She told them about, the Vietnam War, about all these different things. And these kids, were just like, the mothers said they were just glued to her stories. And now imagine that. Here's these little kids who are learning history from somebody who experienced it. And that's going to make such a difference in their lives, And then this older woman just being, so feeling so cared for by this family who are strangers. Yeah. And then you read stories of drive-by birthday parties, because it's somebody's birthday and you can't celebrate. So the people who know get in their cars, they have balloons out the windows, they ride by the house and chant, sing happy birthday, and throw flower petals and whatever. Yeah. So, just things like this where they can see beyond their own nose. Yeah. One of the Indian tribes here is the Kalispel, I think. They have a casino a couple of hours away from us. And we heard that they gave, because they had to shut down, all of their fresh food to the Newport Food Bank. So just this whole thing of people thinking about others and reaching out and being kind. And then not to mention, what's going on with the healthcare workers and the danger they're, exposing themselves to, including, all the EMT and the first responders and all those people, how stressful it is. And yet, there they are taking care of the rest of us. So to really see the amount of kindness that there is, and to let that affect us so that we reciprocate the kindness, instead of the virus is coming after me, it's like, no, this is really an opportunity. Okay. So everything that occurs in the world around us is interpreted in terms of how it relates to me. For example, we see two people talking softly. And what happens? We're sure that they're talking about us, maybe even criticizing us behind our back. Right? Okay. When someone doesn't say good morning in the same friendly tone as usual, we're certain that we did something wrong and that they are mad at us. We become easily offended, jealous, and defensive. True or not true? True. Being self-centered makes our relationship with the world very narrow. In the realm of general society, we often look at issues only in terms of how they will affect us in the short term. Yeah. And I look at this and I see some people, I won't mention names, but in the government level, who care more about the economy than human lives. Yeah. Now, yes, the economy is important. But if you don't have people alive, you don't have an economy. Yeah. There was one political cartoon that showed a cemetery with a gravestone, to grandma, to so-and-so, beloved mother, grandmother, wife, scholar, whatever it is, whatever she did, and she died so that your 401k could live. For a 401k is like a savings for old age. Yeah. So, so this is what some people care about. Yeah. But that's not our values, is it? And if you're only worried about your 401k, you're going to be totally miserable. Yeah. Anyway, come, go. Money comes, money goes. Yeah. So rather than be focused on a future that hasn't happened and being anxious about what could happen but hasn't happened, if we focus on being kind and purifying and creating merit right now, that future will take care of itself. And we'll have less negativity, more merit going into that future. Mm-hmm. Okay. Not realizing that our own long-term happiness depends on the well-being of others in our neighborhood, city, state, country, and the world. We support policies that work for our own immediate welfare or the welfare of our family or group. Thinking in this self-centered way, we may believe that the long-term consequences of these policies do not affect us, that we can just ignore them and others will fix them later on. So this is also the attitude regarding the climate crisis. Yeah, our economy right now is more important and, we need the oil. And so let's, we'll do that. And the younger generation, they're bright kids, they'll take care of it if they're still alive. Okay? So that's... Whenever we criticize others or ourselves, we do so under the influence of self-centered thought. Self-centered thought pretends to be on our side and to look out for our welfare, while it actually does the opposite. It makes us act inconsiderately and unethically, thus creating the causes for misery. I'm sure we can all make examples from our lives, It also ruins any joy that comes our way by making us fearful that it will disappear, or making us envious that others have it better. Self-preoccupation gets in the way of any constructive activity we want to do, inflicting self-doubt where self-doubt does not belong, and making us suspicious when there's no reason to be. In short, this self-centered thought, not another person, is the biggest enemy that impedes our happiness. Thankfully, the self-centered thought is not who we are. It is simply a thought, albeit a powerful one. We have the potential to overcome our self-centeredness, which causes us so much misery, and to cultivate good qualities such as love, compassion, and generosity, which lead to our own and others' happiness. It is important to remember that our innermost nature is not inherently selfish. That's quite important. Okay. Scientists may say, but, we're hardwired, to take care of ourselves, to survive, and it's survival of the fittest. And His Holiness says, no, it's survival of the most cooperative. If we forget this, that our inner nature is not inherently selfish. If we forget this, we will feel guilty for being selfish, and that just results in our becoming more self-preoccupied. Abandoning self-preoccupation doesn't mean we don't take care of ourselves or that we treat ourselves like dirt. That is just another form of self-centeredness that says, if I'm not the best, then I must be the worst. Or I'm so important, I can make everything go wrong. We must take care of ourselves and look after our health and well-being, and we can do this without self-centeredness. To cultivate love and compassion and to reach out to help others, we must have a healthy body and mind. Otherwise, we will become a burden to others, and that is counter to our ultimate aim. So we must avoid going to the other extreme and thinking that resting, bathing, eating, studying, going on a meditation retreat, and so on are all selfish because we do them to take care of ourselves. No, we got to take care of ourselves so we can be of benefit to others. Okay? We do this to keep ourselves balanced so that in the long term we'll be able to benefit others. And then there's a reflection, called rooting out a self-centered thought. It can be hard to notice when a self-centered thought arises, and it colors our perceptions, but we can look for clues. When we find, so this is how you've identified the self-centered thought, When we find ourselves judging and labeling others negatively, we just got done with retreat. Did you notice yourself doing that at all? Judging and labeling other people negatively? We have a precept not to look in other people's bowls. Why do they have so much food in their bowl? They're eating all the sweets. Don't they know that's not good for them? I vacuumed the floor last week. Why do I have to do it again? Petty, stupid things. And we spend our time judging people about them. This person walks into every session 2 seconds before we start. Can't they ever come on time? Yeah. Or this person wiggles during the meditation session. Or that person still smells like Lysol. I know that they use the Lysol to clean everything so that nobody would get sick, but can't they clean themselves so they don't smell like Lysol? Okay, so when we find ourselves judging and labeling others negatively, the self-centered thought is present. When we are piqued with irritation or anger, it's usually because things are not going just the way we want them to. Okay, they told me that the teaching was in Ananda, and I came to Ananda, but the teaching was in Chenrezig, and they didn't tell me it had been changed. When we catch ourselves arguing with others, we may be attached to our ideas, labeling ours right and theirs wrong. Definitely. Okay. So we have to sit 3 feet away. That's what the news said. No, they changed it. We have to sit 6 feet away. Take out the measuring tape so we can measure and make sure we're sitting exactly 3 feet away. 6. We read different newspapers at different times. But whatever we believe happens to be the right way. Okay? So some say the coronavirus spreads on food, and other people say, no, it doesn't. It's a respiratory thing. It spreads in the air. Yeah. Well, I read somebody who says, no, you can't catch it through food. But then I thought if somebody sneezes on your food. But how long does the coronavirus survive on food? We know it survives on glass and plastic for a long time, but I don't eat those. Yeah. When we greedily crave to have something and act to get it without considering the effects of our actions on others, the self-centered thought is at work for sure. Noticing these clues, we remind ourselves that self-centeredness creates problems and suffering in our lives, and we generate the motivation to change it by enlarging our perspective. Okay, so by thinking, I'm determined to win this argument no matter what, but in doing so, I know that I'll damage a relationship that is important to me and hurt someone. Okay, so now when, people are at home, you're working from home, and so you're with the same people all day, all the time. Yeah, the tendency to pick faults at people, because you're in close proximity, and also because even though they're family members and you love them, you know them very well. And so their little quirks really bug you now, because you can't get away from them. And so, your spouse is doing their work, of trying to help the family, but he goes like this. And you're furious. Why doesn't he stop doing like this? He always does like that. Why did I marry this guy? Yeah. Now, I'm choosing stupid things, but how many times do fights start over stupid things? And then we're determined to win that fight. Yeah. And we come up with all of our wise things. I read that going like this, does something in some part of your brain that will cause irreparable damage. Yeah, I read that. So don't go like that, because I can see your brain cells die. Did you really read an article that said that? Maybe from InfoWars. Yeah. Okay. But if we know that we're just going to damage a relationship of somebody that we care about and a relationship that's important to us, then really we have to step back and say, why do I always have to be right? Why do I have to pick on people for every little or big thing? Yeah. What am I getting out of doing it? Well, maybe I get some attention. Yeah. Because, that person's paying attention to me when we're quarreling. But is that really the kind of attention I want? Yeah. And what example is that setting for the children and for the rest of the family? Yeah. So I think in these situations, especially if you're stuck at home like that, have some fun. Have a sense of humor. I thought it was so great. The Italians standing on their balconies, serenading each other. One guy's playing the saxophone and somebody else with a guitar and one lady with an accordion. Do things like that. Yeah. Joke around with the people that you live with. We've got to have a sense of humor in this situation. Okay. And, and care for the people. And if you're at home with your kids, take time to really enjoy being with your kids. Yeah. Ask them what they're studying. Talk about what they're studying with them. Yeah. Tell them stories. Read books together. It's very, very bonding. I read one article about a woman. Her father was a doctor in New York, and he, got the virus, and he was at home, and he was very, very ill. But they would read to each other. Yeah. And when reading, became difficult, she would read to him. And it was their way of spending some time together doing something that they both enjoy. And it was a way of saying, I love you and I care about you, even though both of them knew that he may not survive. Yeah. So just taking the time to do things and teach your kids how to wash the dishes, let them help in the kitchen. And when they can't quite get their laundry in the laundry basket, like my nephew, he's an athlete, but his laundry, he tosses it, it never quite falls in the laundry basket. It's always on one side or the other of the laundry basket, so that my sister has to pick it up. So, you can either say, beep, 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 can't you get your laundry in the basket? Who do you think we are? Or I tease him and I say, you're such a great athlete. He was a football player. You knew exactly where to aim that football to get it where you want it. Why can't you do that with your dirty clothes? Let's practice. Come on. We'll have a practice session of throwing your dirty clothes. So you make a joke and have some humor with things. Yeah. Okay, so noticing these clues, we remind ourselves that self-centeredness creates problems and suffering in our lives, and generate the motivation to determine it by enlarging our perspective. Yeah, I read this already, but it never hurts to read it again. I'm determined to win this argument no matter what. But in doing so, I know that I'll damage a relationship that is important to me, and I'll hurt someone else. And I don't want to do that. That's not the kind of behavior I want to have. I'm going to calm myself down and then approach the situation more openly without being so judgmental and opinionated.
It's a comment. I heard a story about a family where they're home now and they have 2 teenagers. And what the mother said is, "This is so nice. My teenagers have been social distancing for the last few years." And now we get to spend some time together.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Someone online shared that they adopted their mom's lady friend because their mother is dead. But this woman is a senior citizen and she checks on her all the time to see if she needs anything, and she goes to get it for her.
That's beautiful.
More often now that people are saying solidarity is coming back. And I really want to hear more stories like that and how that affects the society in the long run, this kind of experience we are having here right now. And the other thing is also that the democracy can be stronger afterwards when people are really taking responsibility for each other. What's a great effect?
Yeah.
So Tanner, in response to what you're saying about being humorous, he says, can you talk about if your joking is perceived as harsh speech and the person gets offended?
Okay. Sometimes it's good when you're joking to kind of say, I'm joking afterwards. Yeah. Lama Yeshe used to do that all the time. You know, he would joke and then he would say, joking. And then sometimes he would go, maybe not joking. Okay. And if someone misinterprets your joke, you know, just apologize to them. And then see that some people are, you know, sensitive about certain things. We all have very different senses of humor. And I know I tend to, I can have sometimes a sarcastic sense of humor. Yeah. And some people like it and some people, they do not like it at all, I've learned. Yeah. So then I have to say, okay, don't use that sense of humor with certain people.
Tracy shared that she sent her father a birthday pizza because he's in isolation.
Oh, nice.
And then Alex is asking, how do we respond to people who say that pursuing a dedicated spiritual life is selfish?
Oh, so dedicated, so pursuing a dedicated money life is not selfish? I mean, I think regarding that is to explain, you know, different people have different things that they find meaningful in their life. Yeah. And we need every type of person in society. You know, so a society without any people pursuing a spiritual life would be very different than a society where people are dedicated to doing that. Yeah. So it may not be our cup of tea, but it is others' cup of tea, and it does no harm, and it actually does benefit. Yeah. So in the same way, you know, somebody could say, you know, why are you dedicated to being a rocket scientist? That doesn't do any good for the world. You just build things that get sent into space and blow up, you know, or they send us back pictures. But, you know, what good do pictures of Mars do us? Yeah, somebody could easily say that. You know, why are we spending so much money doing that? Well, for some people, this kind of research is valuable. Yeah, and it stimulates them and it gives them a reason to live. And, in one way, it's not harming. It's good. It's increasing the base of human knowledge. Yeah. So, what do they say? Different strokes for different folks. Yeah. So we need a society where people have different interests and they're able to act out their interests. And as long as they're not harming others, then it's okay. It's right livelihood. If you're intent on making big and better rockets, and bombs and things, then I would question that. But, everybody's quite different. What I would say is, if people say that to you, if you're somebody who wants to have a dedicated spiritual life, and other people say that to you, to check and see if you're moved. Does their comment shake you and make you doubt your own intention? Because that's the important thing. Whether you change their mind or not, who knows if you can or can't. But what's important is if that makes you doubt yourself. Yeah. And if it does, then you have to really stop and think, why am I doing this? And what's the long-term result? Because for a spiritual life, the result doesn't always come immediately. It could come in the long term. But you have to be really certain about that. And you have to be certain about your own human potential to change and become a better person, and how that helps others right now as well as later. Yeah. So the important thing, if somebody says that comment, is to guard against self-doubt.
I was thinking that in times like this, we also have an opportunity to look at and experience interdependence, because in normal times, in quote unquote normal times, that's very hard to do. We think that we are self-sufficient, we have a job, we earn money, we have a home and all the trappings of modern society. And so it's very hard to see how we really depend on each other. But when things come to where we are, then it's just a lot more evident. If you go to the grocery store and all of a sudden you can buy the things that you're depending on, it's like, why? Well, nobody's producing them, or somebody bought them before I did and they took a whole lot of them. So then all of these things start to come together, and it just makes it more evident.
How much we need each other.
Can you give some tips about how we can turn this time of quarantine into a retreat from afar?
Yeah, you just do the retreat from afar. We have all the materials. Just decide what practice you're going to do. Set up a schedule for yourself. And then, learn the practice. Do, if you're doing Lamrim meditation or reciting, the meditation on the Buddha, which is what we did this year for the retreat from afar. Yeah, just make yourself a schedule and then keep to that schedule and do your practice. Yeah, and include some times of reading Dharma books. You can watch videos of teachings that will help your meditation if you're doing a retreat from afar. So it's actually, if you're a practitioner, this is a great time, because you now have time to read the Dharma books you never had a chance to read before because you were too busy running around. Now you have time to read them. You have time to do longer practice. You have time to discuss the Dharma with other people. If you need some help establishing a schedule, there are some little groups. Kathy Elton, leads them, of people who make a determination to meditate at a certain time, and then they all check in together. And Venerable Chuni will give you that information.
I just put on the website a post called COVID-19 Practice Resources, and it has some of the videos that people have been doing about how to practice with it. It also has some links to guided meditations, Tara practice, Medicine Buddha practice, Tonglen practice, and at the bottom of that page is the schedule and the link for how to get in touch with the Dharma group that is doing the daily practices together. So if you go to our homepage, it's right there in the posts, the news, Click
Uh-huh.
on the one on the far left, and all that information is there.
Okay, good.
What prayers do you recommend right now for the coronavirus?
What?
What prayers do you
What-
recommend for the coronavirus?
Okay. His Holiness has recommended doing the Tara practice and saying lots of Tara mantra. So the Tara practice is on tubtenchildren.org. I think there's a recording of me leading it.
Yeah, and they can link to it from that same page.
Yeah, and from that same page Venerable Chuni was just talking about it, you can also link to the practice. Doing the taking and giving meditation is also good. Meditating on loving kindness and compassion. Actually, this book, okay, get this book. It has reflections and at the end of every chapter, and those can become your meditation sessions. Or get Approaching the Buddhist Path, His Holiness's book, also has many reflections in it. Or the book Guided Buddhist Meditations, or How to Meditate, that's Venerable Sanghya Kadra wrote. Get these books, and yeah, because any practice you do is good.
And if people check on the website, on the Retreat from Afar webpage, there's a whole list of resources on there, links like the Easy Path teachings that you did that have guided meditations. And then if they email in, we can send them the mailers that we did so they could have access to that as well.
Yeah.
Like we have
Okay.
those. We can just send you them if you're wanting to do retreat now.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff both on the Abbey website and the tubtenchildren.org website.
What came up to me when you were talking, somebody once asked me, why you care a lot about that person? And I realized that that person doesn't threaten my space.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows me my difficulty to open, to receive the help. So I really encourage the people to look into that in this difficult time. If you allow yourself to be helped, to be cared for.
Yeah.
And if you allowed yourself to care for others, look at your mindset and fears.
Yeah.
So Kathy Elton is saying that divorce rates, domestic violence, and child abuse are on the rise during this self-quarantine. Any thoughts on this?
Well, that's the effect of self-centered thought, isn't it? Isn't it? You're just confined with people, and your afflictions arise, and you don't have your usual way of dealing with them by either going to the pub or running or whatever. So you take it out on the people who are close to you, who are the people you care about the most. Yeah, so it's really self-defeating. So, what I recommend for those people is, notice your irritation and your anger or whatever, and then get the book Working with Anger or the book Healing Anger and study that and learn all the different ways to work with your anger and frustration so that you don't have to take it out on the people that you care about or take it out on anybody for that matter. So find a way to get some exercise in your flat, run in place. Okay, you can take the dog out for a walk. Yeah, if you don't have a dog, maybe this is the time to get one. Actually, I heard a lot of people during this time are fostering dogs. And I think having a pet can give you so much release in this kind of thing, And you take the dog out, you play with the dog. You find ways to deal with your pent-up energy, And of course, if you're a meditator, do that. If you're a practitioner, use that. But if you're not, find another way. Start a garden out on your balcony or, something.
When we talk about the things which counteract the self-centered thought, then come up with things like altruism, concern for others, and compassion. Those are kind of seem to be more like feelings or emotions than
Mhm.
thoughts. But we're saying this is self-centered thought. So is this more a thought or a feeling, or sort of just a way of thinking that comes together with many different feelings?
Okay. This has to do with vocabulary, okay? Because feeling in English usually means emotion, okay? Feeling in Buddhism means just the feeling of pleasure, pain, or neutral feeling, okay? Buddhism views emotions as actually conceptual minds that are thoughts. Okay. In English, we think thoughts are up here and, and emotions are down here. But if we look closely behind emotions, there's a ton of thoughts. Yeah. And the thought is very much related to the emotion. From a Buddhist viewpoint. So if you start changing your thoughts, your emotions or your feelings, as we use the word feeling in the West, that will change. So you could say it's the self-centered feeling, or you could say it's the self-centered thought. They come down to the same thing, because often we think of self-centeredness as a feeling, I need this, I have to have this, I want this. But isn't that also a thought? Yeah. And isn't that thought creating a lot of inner turbulence? So it really shows how by changing what we're thinking, we can change what we're feeling.
In this time, as the pandemic makes existing poverty even worse, people need healthcare, housing, food, and other basics so badly. Is there a way to make that work part of our practice?
Yeah. Like, I'm going to give the example of that woman with her 6 kids. So do what you can, There's one woman that we're in touch with in our community. And she's still, how old is Bon? She's in her 70s. Yeah, well into her 70s. She's still volunteering at the food bank. Yeah, she said they had to completely change the way they're doing the food bank. People can't come in there and shop anymore, but the volunteers bring the food out to the car for them. But, she's in the age group where you're supposed to stay sheltered, but her nature is she wants to do things for others. So yeah, you can do that. I'm hoping what we can do is, because we have an excellent seamstress here, is that we can start making some masks for the hospital. There was a thing in our local newspaper that they need more masks. So we're going to see if we can do that, right? Yeah. So yeah, just see where you have talents and abilities and what you feel comfortable doing. And, if you're a high risk or a low risk or whatever, and then do something. Yeah. We can give to our local food banks too. So you can, make a money donation. You can give extra food. All that toilet paper that you're hoarding, you can give it to somebody. What? And pretzels. Yeah. All the hand sanitizer that, will last you from now to the next 3 countless great eons. You can give it to some people.